Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, Stephanie Vaquer has caused a crap storm on the internet. She did an interview with some kind of podcast called Rock and Pop FM. I guess it's Chilean or Spanish or something to that effect, because it had to be translated by a fan. The Twitter fan who is translating it is called S Bubs. So she told WWE what AEW was offering her, and they basically said, we can't match that. Good luck. And people got mad about this, but let's read the entire thing. I want to give you the full context. Stephanie said she told WWE what AEW was offering in terms of money, and they said, we can't match that. Good luck in AEW. So she says she was crying, even though she was going to make more money, because WWE was her dream. And with that, she realized she cared more about going to WWE. Later, Shawn Michaels himself called her and talked to her. She told him that even if someone offered her $1 million, she wouldn't be happy if she wasn't doing what she loved. She says Shawn totally understood and told her some great stuff that she'll keep to herself, but that made her want to sign, and next day she accepted the contract. So 361 quote tweets of people in their feelings, absolutely certified angry that she decided to not take the money and instead go to WWE. Here's the thing. I want to speak my thoughts on it first, and then we'll go into the comment section. It's an old saying called a bird in the hand or two in the bush. What that means is either take what you're being offered right now or postpone it for something that's unknown in the future. She had the money. We don't know how much the AEW is offering her right now. And then there's the potential for greater money in WWE and also exposure. She decided to gamble and say, I'm going to go to WWE. And it ended up working out. She's won both of the top NXT titles already. She had an entire show built around her. She's likely going to be one of the main events of a WrestleMania weekend show. And sometimes people take the money and it works out for them. Sometimes it doesn't. Life is not always about taking the bigger bag. And some fans don't understand this. Some individuals don't understand this. Sometimes there are things that are more important than money. Sometimes there are things that are more valuable than a paycheck. Some people are motivated by things that are not money. I'm not saying whether this is a good or bad decision. I'm just saying it was her decision and it worked out for her. Now, somebody said, let's get into some of these responses. Trips slid her a $25 WWE shop gift card and it was wraps. That's crazy. She's being called a mark, of course. It says LeBron James is the GOAT. WWE is the GOAT when it comes to lowballing and getting away with it. The crazy thing is since they keep saying lowballing, they don't understand what that means. What does it mean to lowball a talent? If they offer you, let's say, $200,000, and AEW is offering you $250,000, it's less, but is it lowballing? I don't think so. Lowballing needs to have a proper definition. Just because you were offered less money doesn't mean that you were lowballed. People are calling her a Fed soldier. This one's pretty good, and it's actually pro Stephanie. Everybody is all about for the love of the game until the particular game is WWE. This is a really, really good point. Because remember, when going to WWE in the past, it was considered selling out. If you were in Ring of Honor, literally sleeping in your car, then going to WWE, oh, you're a bad person. You're terrible. You're very bad. How dare you not sleep in your car and work in this indie promotion for us? How dare you go work for WWE? If you were a British wrestler, how dare you go work for WWE? You're supposed to come work for our very nebulous indie promotions where the guy training the talent are probably also porking the talent. You're supposed to come work for us, for our entertainment in a dingy gym, rather than going to work for WWE. But if you go work for WWE and you don't go to AEW, then well, you're not a sellout because WWE didn't offer you more money. You're a mark because you didn't go where the money was. But like WWE doesn't have money. They have money, clearly. She's going to get paid on the next contract too, by the way. Somebody called her a geek. Another one says, why on earth would you sacrifice money just to say you work for the Fed? It's 2025. There was a reason why AEW was created. Yeah, there was a reason. And it was because a couple of indie wrestlers didn't feel like they could get the money or the position in WWE. And look, it was all about that. We all think that, the Young Bucks couldn't get the money that they wanted. They probably could have got paid in WWE. Kenny Omega certainly could have got the money. Would he have gotten the position? Probably not. Would they have built the company around him? Probably not. JR was completely right when he said that there's really only two things. There's, cash and creative. And then when you look at Stephanie Vaquer's position, what was her creative going to be in AEW? She had already lost to Sasha Banks. She was going to be in the middle of the pack. And she went to NXT and she got a really good spot. I mean, I'm telling you, it works out for her, I guess. The next one says Triple H after she re-signs on a $10,000 a year contract. Well, that's just crazy. Somebody says, so translation is AEW pays women better. And Stephanie in turn decided to screw the indie promotions that were booking her with not dropping the title, while having Willow take an off day to fly to fill in and messed up CMLL's relations at the time. Okay. Well, I can tell you this. Nobody cares about CMLL. Hate to break it to you. Nobody cares about these indie promotions either. Who cares? The idea that AEW pays women better, I mean, they might be paying this particular woman better. They may have offered her more money, but we don't know how much more. Again, she didn't get into details. It could be a difference between 120 and 125. Or it could be the difference between 50 and 5 million. But I doubt it's that different. All right. If it didn't matter, if it was a small difference, I could see going with the less amount of money. But this also happens a lot in regular sports. It happens a lot in football and basketball. People take pay cuts to go to a team that they want to go to. It happens. Again, sometimes there are things that are more important than money. Sometimes there's people you want to get away from. Sometimes there's exposure that you want to have, a platform that you want to have. One of the fans that responded to this was talking about how big WWE is in Chile. And it's not just that she's a super fan, but it also opens up all these different opportunities for her in her home country, which I hadn't even considered of. I don't know if she's going to plan to live in the United States, but assuming she goes back to Chile at some point, she now is going to have a bigger platform. She's going to be a bigger personality. She's going to be more well-known. It happens, So I understand. But let's get into this one. Let's get into more. We can't match that is insane. Well, we know WWE has money. That's not a question. Here's another one that says the same thing. We can't match that is a very funny thing to say when you publicly brag about how much you charge fans for a show every single month. Well, they don't brag about how much they charge fans. They brag that the fans are there. But let's talk about the we can't match that gimmick. Because this is another one of those times where individuals think that just because you have a lot of money, that you want to spend a lot of money on one particular item. If you woke up tomorrow, the same loaf of bread that you spent $3.99 on is now all of a sudden $15. You're going to say, well, I can afford it. No, you would ask questions. You were like, why does this cost so much? You know, I can hire a window. If I'm going to hire an indie wrestler, it's going to have to be for somebody who has a proven track record and is a proven draw, of which there are none. And this is one of the things that is deeply problematic and things individuals quite often don't understand anymore, is that there are no more Hulk Hogans. There are no more Roddy Pipers. There are no Jim Duggins, no Junkyard Dogs. There's nobody on the independents right now, not a single person, who can come into WWE and make a difference. Not one. There is nobody that you can bring in from the independents into WWE and they will make a goddamn difference. WWE has managed to get people to understand, you as an indie wrestler, you are, I don't want to say like ground beef, but you are essentially, what's the word I'm looking for? Your raw materials, okay? Of which they can now sculpt the talent that they want, right? You are not going to change the company, so they're not going to spend that much money on you if you're untested and unproven. Yes, they're going to force you to have a tryout too, unless you have a history of, being a star or being on television or something like that. Otherwise, get prepared to have a tryout and get prepared to get offered, a decent salary, but not a hell of a lot of money. The days of there being some kind of territory wrestler that you can bring in, or some guy from WCW that you could bring in that's going to make an immediate impact, that day is gone. It hasn't been this way in 20 years. There's a very small number of guys in 20 years that you could bring into WWE and they'll make an immediate impact. AJ Styles was one such character. Maybe Kenny Omega was another one. Maybe. Everybody else, absolutely not. So when you think about things from that perspective, that even the most popular indie wrestler is not nearly as popular as some of the lower mid-level WWE superstars, why would they pay you a ton of money to come in? Why would they do that? It wouldn't make sense. So when they say we can't match that, they don't mean literally they can't. It's literally they cannot justify paying you that kind of money with no track record. Oh, you're a big star in Mexico. Great. We won Mexico once a year. And we don't run Chile virtually at all. So why should we pay you whatever Tony Khan was going to pay you? But you can work to get to that point if she becomes a main roster talent, which she absolutely will. If she becomes a high-level main roster talent, which she absolutely will, she's going to make more money and be more famous than if she just went to AEW. Again, sometimes what's in the bush is better than what you have in your hand. But even though, more often than not, people take the money that is in their hand right now. Here's another one. Fed getting away with lowballing wrestlers because they're that much of a mark for the company is exactly what they deserve. Again, lowballing. We don't know what the numbers are. We don't know what these numbers are. Somebody said, y'all want Stephanie to fail so badly because her dream company is the WWE. Is actually sad. A bunch of people are calling her a mark. I can't wait for the next generation of talent who didn't grow up watching a monopolized business. Maybe then they will realize leverage is the key, not a dream. They don't have any leverage. She's an indie wrestler. What leverage does she have? Well, AEW is willing to pay me. Okay. They already told you that. You can't use AEW as leverage. You also can't use AEW as leverage, again, because you're just raw materials. If you really want to get gutter with it, NXT is filled with women. If Stephanie Vaquer would have made the decision to work in AEW, she still would be a great wrestler. but she would be a great wrestler in AEW. And she would have to find a place on the card. She'd have to get on TV somehow. You have plenty of good female wrestlers in AEW. Serena Deeb, Chris Statlander, Camille, who isn't even on television right now. Jamie Hayter, who has been, downplayed lately. There's several. There was even some that was trapped on Ring of Honor. They have plenty of female talent in AEW that they don't do nothing with. NXT has plenty of female talent who people have never seen. And you don't know what the ceiling is for some of these girls. So why should they spend so much money on one talent? Again, this is a completely different... This is where, wrestling is so much different from regular sports. Because in regular sports, everybody's playing hungry hippos for the same talent. WWE is not really doing that. They're picking and choosing certain talent that they want to bring in. But for the most part, they're going out and recruiting talent. People who got the athleticism, maybe have the background that might be able to survive, on a wrestling deal. People who might have interest. And they're going to take them and try to make them superstars. They don't really care about whether it's an indie wrestler or a washed out football player or an acrobat or a track star. None of that matters. Your background doesn't even matter that much anymore. And that gives WWE an advantage. Not the fact that it was monopolized. Because in some places, TNA was the number one wrestling company. Because it was on free television. And also, AEW's existence doesn't change the fact that people are still going to prefer to watch WWE. I mean, it's just goofy. Some people are going to make that decision. They're going to make the decision to go to AEW. That's fine. Other people are going to make this decision, and they're going to have their own reasons. Clearly, she was financially secure. She wasn't sleeping in her car, which is why she was able to go to WWE. There was another story. I don't want to cover it too much, but there was another story that people was going around saying that Jordynne Grace took a pay cut to come to WWE. See, that's the kind of stuff that they do, right? They say weird shit like that and end up not being true. But it was one of the things that they floated around on the internet. Oh, she took a huge pay cut to join WWE, with no evidence of it whatsoever. Now, if we wouldn't even known that Stephanie Vaquer could have gotten paid more at AEW, if she wouldn't have told us, because the dirt sheets didn't have that kind of information. Okay, here's another one. Jokes aside, it's total bullshit that WWE wasn't willing to match the price on Stephanie Vaquer, and that now left a sour taste in my mouth. Well, we don't know what the price was. I don't know what the price was. The thing is, they're offering her an opportunity. She's going to get paid pretty well. But again, she could have taken the money if that's what she wanted. I mean, it is what it is. If you want the money, go for it. But there's people who make the decision to not follow the money all the time. I mean, isn't that what the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and Adam Page and all those guys did? They could have made more money going to WWE. They chose not to. Wasn't it recently a guy like Jeff Cobb? They were saying, oh, he's coming to WWE. He's staying in Japan. Nobody seems to call these people marks. They could make more money going to WWE. They chose not to. They stay with AEW. They re-sign with AEW like Daniel Garcia did. What's the problem? People are going to make individual decisions. If anybody is the mark, it's Tony Khan. I don't know. Let's move on. Somebody says, I can't hate on her for this, but to be honest, if that's where she wants to be, then good for her. WWE screaming from the rooftops about record profits, yet still being cheap is hilarious, though. This is why competition is a good thing. Yeah, true. If the talent are upset about that, then they can go to AEW, where they don't talk about record profits or profits at all, because it all comes from Tony's piggy bank, so none of it matters. So somebody said, why would she admit this publicly? Well, she's probably just telling the story as it occurred. She's probably not thinking too much about it. Somebody says, so most wrestlers aren't about chasing the money. They're just fucking marks. Well, the thing is, if you were going to make a lot of money, wrestling isn't the best place to start anyway. Wrestling is one of those businesses where you make virtually nothing at the beginning. This is why you get so many stories about wrestlers getting on the indies for hot dogs. They're working for free. They're sleeping in their cars to try to get exposure, all this kind of stuff. Because it's worth virtually nothing at the beginning. You have no track record. Nobody knows who the hell you are. But over time, you get in one of these coveted spots in one of these top companies, you can take care of yourself. The crazy thing is, if she would have said the same thing and went to work in TNA, nobody would have said this was a problem. She could have said, WWE offered me X amount of dollars, AEW offered me X amount of dollars, but I wanted to be in TNA. Nobody would have complained. Nobody would have cared. Everybody would have been like, oh, that's interesting, and moved on and went on with the rest of their day. And this happens. People do choose to go places outside of AEW and WWE. People choose to go to Japan. People quit WWE to go make less money elsewhere. It happens. People quit AEW to go make less money elsewhere. It happens. Somebody says, I'm not a fan of WWE, but none of you ever chose a job over another one that paid more. I took a 20% pay cut to move from a job that I worked overnights and weekends for a remote 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Not saying AEW is the former, just money's not always the only factor. That is a mature outlook. That is mature. If somebody says, I never want to hear anyone spew that wrestlers all about chasing the bag bullshit ever again. Because not all of them are. Only some of them are. The smart ones are, if we're being honest. If you're going to take bumps for security. But, she was working for a big company in Mexico. She didn't work for Mexican independence, where she can go out and break her goddamn neck and make nothing. People are saying she's stupid, which is not true. It's considering it turned out well for her. I don't think it was stupid. Here's another one. She was willing to take a significant pay cut because she's that dedicated to WWE. She's a Federation soldier through and through. This is hilarious because, what is a Federation soldier? Somebody says, everyone is acting like this is a singularity, but about 80% of the young South American and Spanish wrestlers would do this if the opportunity presented it to them. For many years, WWE was all fans knew as wrestling thanks to their local TV runs, so it's like a neuron activation thing. Neuron activation. I'm telling you, WWE is still going to end up being the goal. You have girls in Japan saying that they want to go to WWE. They have plenty of promotions in Japan. They just don't want to be there because they're probably not making any goddamn money. Or they don't get any opportunities. Or whatever the case may be. You gotta listen to what people are saying to you. Not just, react to one little thing here and there. Here's one that's interesting. The fact that WWE, of all companies, manages to have a sizable contingent of Disney adults is a generational PR achievement worthy of study by future marketers and propagandists alike. I have said that, WWE for quite a few people is like Disney. They dedicate themselves to it. They get tattoos and all this kind of stuff. They're the people who are paying $1,000 to go to WrestleMania. Paying $600 to meet and greet with, goddamn Jey Uso or whatever. Look, that's people do what their money is on them. But I definitely understand why the company isn't in the business of chasing it behind indie wrestlers. Somebody says, I can't hate someone for knowing what they want. Really hope Stephanie finds main roster success. Well, that's very professional. LMAO, WWE of all companies, acting like they can't match an offer just to lowball her and for her to just take it? I'm crying. What a mark. They don't even understand this. She's making economic decisions aren't always financial decisions. You know, when people learn things about the economy, you have to learn that. Sometimes, like the guy said in the previous comment, you make a financial decision based off of outside influences. You know, you might not take that job that pays more money because you got children. You might not take that job because it's on the other side of the country and you don't want to leave your family. There's a whole lot of different reasons why somebody might want to do a thing, you know? And one of the many things that people have not talked about is that there are friends of her abusive ex-boyfriend in AEW. She didn't mention that, but it's true. Guys like Rush and Dralistico are friends with Cortero, who is her ex-boyfriend who beat her up. They're friends with that guy. See, nobody thought about that though, right? I mentioned that when she signed the contract. And it was because it was talked about by people who follow Mexican wrestling that there were guys in AEW, luchadors, who were friendly with her ex-boyfriend. So there is certainly more to it than that. And most people forgot completely about that whole thing. But it was a whole big thing when she first signed to WWE about Rush and Dralistico supporting the guy who choked her. But we're not going to get into that. This one says they rejected her the first time and then they lowballed her the second time, but she went anyway. Some people can't be helped. Well, the first time she was basically unknown. She had no real, they would have to train her from the ground up. She came back a couple of years later and they offered her some money. They offered her a contract, but they didn't want to pay whatever Tony Khan was willing to pay, which is, I think, fair. It sounds pretty fair to me. She said pay cut just to be there. She's a God tier Fed soldier. Fed soldier. She's not taking a pay cut because she wasn't getting paid by AEW. She was offered a contract by AEW. Here's another one. I don't want to use the phrases of the young people that Stephanie Vaquer is, quote, the Fed's greatest soldier. Please don't admit publicly that you took less money somewhere because it was your dream to be there. Well, no, not necessarily. That's not going to, excuse me, that's not going to prevent her from making a lot of money later. Because if she increases her platform, guess what? She's worth even more money in AEW. If she gets to the main roster and the next contract doesn't look good and she decides, well, I was still going to make more money in AEW as long as she's been on the main roster, and she might be able to bump business, Tony Khan's still going to spend that money. So it's not, hell, if anything, he might spend more money 5 years later than he would have spent at that time. So can't complain about that. Somebody says, for a $1 billion company, WWE TKR are very fucking cheap with their money. WWE is going to lose a good amount of free agents if this is their fucking mindset. And this is why I mentioned earlier about the fact that indie wrestlers are just raw materials. You come in and they try to make you a star. That's why so many of them end up losing weight. They end up getting in better shape, before they make TV, because you're just raw materials. You're not what they want immediately yet. There are no Roddy Pipers, no Randy Savages, and nobody that you can bring in from the independents and immediately and turn business around. The only people that can immediately turn business around are people who've been on TV for a while or people who are in WWE already. if they have to retrain you, or if they have to give you a tryout or something like that, chances are you shouldn't get paid that much money off the rip. And I actually fully support that idea. You know, I mean, get real. Somebody says, remember how I kept telling y'all all that money isn't always the answer to make wrestlers happy? Stephanie has a low contract than what AEW offered her, and yet already Stephanie has made history in WWE, and she hasn't been in the company a full year. Yeah, I mean, once she really gets it together and gets on the main roster, it's going to be great. She's going to do a good job. The thing is, a lot of these people are running with the Meltzer idea that WWE can sign talent just by saying we're the WWE, which they kind of do, and that also happens, you know, in sports. But you got to take the bitter with the sweet, brother. Either you like it or you don't like it. I'm not mad at it. You know, if you're going to she's the one that got to take power drivers and power bombs and work with people. If she's okay with it, because it opens up a bunch of opportunities, and this is what she saw herself doing, I don't see a problem with that at all. Here's another one. This one's pretty funny. I wouldn't go somewhere that used my match to set up a Britt Baker angle for all the money in the world either, to be honest. Which, that's pretty good, man. I gotta say. That's a pretty good one. Everybody's talking about how she's a Fed soldier. This is incredible. So I'm sure the Fed stands that think it's cool WWE charges more for tickets will also think it's funny they lowball wrestlers. Never saw a company brainwash so many idiots. Look, it's not lowballing. We don't know what the ball is. Again, we don't know what the difference is. Is the difference 6 figures? Is the difference 4? Like, we don't know how far off on money it was. So, whatever. And yes, TKO is cheap, by the way. It is absolutely true. They're tired of people coming into the company stealing money, man. Nakamura has been stealing money from WWE almost 10 years. Believe that. He's been there almost 10 years. He probably hasn't made them a goddamn dime. The Good Brothers, they just got rid of those guys. They've been there forever. So, she has all the potential in the world to end up, you know, a top level wrestler in WWE making a ton of money. She's going to get there. I believe she can, barring injury, of course. But a lot of people are very upset. Somebody says, what this tells me is 2 things. 1, AEW pays women better. It's that simple. 2, she's where she wants to be. Rock out, Steph. Everybody keeps talking about how AEW pays women better. That might be true. Maybe it's true. Maybe they just pay all their wrestlers better. Maybe they overpay for wrestlers. But that's all on a sliding scale because we don't know what overpaying, quote unquote, means. Only thing we can say is, are you paying a talent more than they bring in? Because that's bad business. But if you're running a toy company and not a professional wrestling promotion, then it's fine. You know, if it doesn't matter, then who cares? And that's kind of how it is with Tony Khan. If he's willing to pay people millions of dollars who have never drawn millions of dollars, and then they never draw millions of dollars and he ends up losing money, I mean, that is what it is. But it does look bad when you have like a high talent roster and you're paying all these people and you're running smaller buildings than you were 2 years ago. That don't look good. Usually when you have to run smaller buildings, you have to start giving pay cuts or you start having to cut talent. Tony Khan really hasn't done too much of either one of those things, which means that he just eating the losses because he can. He don't have a problem with it. Now he's starting to let contracts expire this year, but that's because of a lot of fan pressure that he's starting to let certain people go. Now here's a good one that I think I'm going to close on. Somebody said, what good is the money up front if it tanks your value? She's better off making good money and building her brand in WWE. That will pay off the rest of her career. And that is a really good point. And is the point, I think, that is the strongest point. Because if AEW wanted her without her going to WWE and they were going to pay her X amount of dollars, wait until she gets them Fed credentials. Wait till she gets on WrestleMania and she gets a fan base. They're building NXT around her right now, and NXT is on network television in the United States. She's going to be worth more to AEW on her next contract than she is on the first one. So that's kind of how business works. But I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace out.
Skin tone, so why attach yourself and piggyback the wealth you didn't earn or lack yourself? I'm telling you to own up to your own success and failures. It's a reason why these sleazy guys